Pokemon Go has no shortage of rare Pokemon, and in this video we will be looking at 33 super rare Pokemon you might never own. So in no particular order, and starting off with Rotom, which has a total of 6 forms, and currently 5 out of 6 have been released in the game. And whenever this Pokemon is available, it is usually for a very short time and often to ticket holding trainers only. The first form to be released was Wash Rotom, which was only available to those who purchased a ticket to the 2020 in-person Go Fest. Following this, in 2022 it did have a global release for the 6th anniversary event as a reward for completing timed research. But this form hasn't returned to the game in over 2 years, but it's not the only form that hasn't returned for a while. Mo Rotom was the next one to release, but again only to those ticket holders attending in-person Go Fest events in 2022 in Berlin, Seattle and Sapporo. Again, this one hasn't returned to the game since. Much like Mo Rotom, Frost Rotom was released in the same way the following year to ticket holding trainers only attending in-person Go Fest events in London, Osaka or New York. The regular form of Rotom was the next one to be released via a research quest only obtainable using a specific code that was distributed during Sinnoh Tour in February 2024. Unlike the Mo and the Frost forms, this was a global release but for a very limited time. And the latest form of Rotom to be released was Heat Rotom, which was available to ticket holding trainers attending in-person Go Fests 2024 in Sendai, Madrid and New York. And with this trend, it does seem like the final form of Rotom to be released in Pokemon Go, Fan Rotom, will be released during in-person Go Fest events in 2025, but we'll have to wait and see for that. And the next Pokemon I want to talk about is a relatively new addition to the game, and that is Maushold, and specifically the Family of 3 version. But why is it so rare? So outside of specific events, Tandemaus is only available via party play, which requires you to party up with at least one other person and complete tasks. Some of these tasks grant you Pokemon encounters and a chance at a Tandemaus encounter. And then once you get 50 Tandemaus candies, you can evolve it into Maushold. But this is where the rarity comes into play. Maushold has 2 forms, the Family of 4 form and the Family of 3 form. And when evolving Tandemaus, there is only a 1% chance to obtain the Family of 3 form, making it a very rare form of Maushold. And it will likely be very rare for a while with the party play requirement and 50 candy cost per evolution. Next we have the origin forms of Dialga and Palkia, which have only been released once during the Sinnoh Go Tour in 2024. These were released globally, but it isn't just the Pokemon themselves that are now rare. It's having them with their signature moves. Roar of Time for Origin Dialga and Spatial Ren for Origin Palkia have adventure effects, which are effects that can be used outside of battles to pause item timers and increase the Pokemon encounter radius respectively. And if you did raid these Pokemon during the only time they were available, you only had a chance of receiving the signature moves. This chance depended on which version you picked for the event, Diamond or Pearl. And if you didn't get the moves with the adventure effects, there is actually no current way to get these moves. Regular and even elite TMs don't offer these moves. The next one on this list is Unknown. This is a Pokemon that is only really available during specific events like Go Fest events, and it's often tied to incense encounters for ticket holders only. Outside of this, they can very rarely spawn in the wild at any time, but there is another reason I have Unknown on this list, and this is because it has 28 different forms, and only a few of them are often available in events at a time, so completing the collection can be pretty tricky. Moving on, we have arguably the biggest grind in Pokemon Go, and that's the Zygarde complete form grind. Whilst Zygarde in its 10% form is pretty easy to get because it is available from a special research story titled From A to Zygarde, the 100% or the complete form, however, is a lot harder to get. To change your Zygarde 10% into the complete form, you need to collect 250 Zygarde cells by walking routes. You can only collect a maximum of 3 Zygarde cells per day, no matter how many routes you do, so if you do manage to get 3 cells per day, it would take at least 84 days to get this Pokemon. This is a very grindy Pokemon to obtain, and really routes aren't the most exciting content in the game in their current state, so the amount of trainers that have completed this grind is pretty low. The next Pokemon on the list has been available a few times, but only at very exclusive in-person events. Skiddo and its evolution Go-Go have been made available only a handful of times in Pokemon Go, but they've never been available globally. Instead, this Pokemon has been locked to City Safari events, which are in-person only events in specific specific cities across the world. It made its debut in 2023 in city safaris in Seoul, Barcelona, and in Mexico City. It will also be available for city safaris in 2024 in Jakarta, Indonesia, and Incheon, South Korea. It seems like this Pokemon is set to stay locked to these events for the future, so trading with someone who has been to one of these is your best bet. And perhaps somewhat less rare than some others on the list, but I thought it would be worth mentioning, is Salazzle. But why is Salazzle rare? Well, Salandit, the pre-evolved form of Salazzle, is only available from 12km eggs, which are the largest distance eggs to hatch, and you can't get these eggs from Pokestops like other eggs. The only way you can get them is by defeating Team Go Rocket leaders. Not only do these eggs take a while to hatch, but if you do manage to hatch a Salandit, it can only evolve if it's female. And Salandit is only female 12.5% of the time. This makes Salazzle quite a rare Pokemon to get. There is, however, another egg-locked Pokemon that is notoriously difficult to obtain, and this Pokemon is Larvesta. This is the most difficult Pokemon to hatch in the game, with less than 1% hatch rate, meaning that not a lot of people actually have it. Not only that, but to get its evolution Volcarona, you need 400 candy, so if you are lucky enough to hatch one, you then need to walk it for hundreds of kilometers to get candy, or spend a lot of rare candy on it. But what is the best way to potentially get this Pokemon and its evolution? As you only get one free infinite use incubator in the game, free to play or casual players that don't spend much money on the game may find this to be one of the most challenging Pokemon to get and to evolve. But in reality, you either have to hatch as many eggs as you can with the infinite incubator, which means a lot of walking, or you could purchase some incubators from the in-game shop. However, it may be worth waiting and not buying many incubators, because it is possible that Larvesta could have a community day in the future, like some of the other 400 candy evolution Pokemon have, like Noibat for example. That brings us to the next few rare Pokemon, which are mythical Pokemon. Whilst mythical Pokemon like Mew and Celebi are pretty rare because you don't get a lot of opportunity to get them, but every new account will still receive the special researches for them. However, there are some rarer mythical Pokemon that are only available on very specific occasions. One of them is Keldeo. Keldeo has only been available once in Pokemon Go, and it cost $8 or the local equivalent to get the research that rewarded it. So generally with this price tag, most players didn't purchase it, and at the time of recording this video, it hasn't returned since. And when it does, it will most likely be behind a paywall as well. Similar to Keldeo is Zarude. This Pokemon has only been available twice in Pokemon Go, once for free for its debut in 2021, and more recently it came back to the game with the Rogue of the Jungle special research in 2024, and this time it was locked behind a paywall like Keldeo. And lastly, for the mythical Pokemon, we have Hooper Confined and Hooper Unbound. Hooper was first made available in Pokemon Go toward the end of 2021, and it was available through a special research titled Misunderstood Mischief, but only trainers that played the game between September and December of 2021 could access this research. The Hooper Unbound form was later available in in-person only elite raids in October, November and December of 2022, and since then there has been no sign of Hooper in the game. Next we have one of the most exclusive and expensive Pokemon you can get in Pokemon Go, Goldengo. Obtaining Goldengo in Pokemon Go is not an easy feat. Not only does it require 999 Gimmighoul coins to evolve Gimmighoul into Goldengo, but you also need to be able to interact with a Nintendo Switch and a copy of Pokemon Scarlet or Violet. So how do you get Gimmighoul? Well, the main way of getting it is to send a postcard from Pokemon Go to Pokemon Scarlet or Violet. This will then reward you with a coin bag that you can use like an incense to get Gimmighoul to spawn to your location for 30 minutes. In order to get the coins that you require to evolve Gimmighoul, you need to send 5 postcards to Pokemon Scarlet or Violet, and you can only send 1 per day, and when you've sent 5, you will get a golden lure module that you can then use to transform a Pokestop into a golden Pokestop. You can then spin the golden Pokestop to get Gimmighoul coins, and you get somewhere between 5 and 10 coins per spin, which is around 30 to 60 per golden lure module because they last for 30 minutes. So getting almost 1,000 coins can take a while. There is, however, an easier and quicker way to get the coins that you need. The quickest way to get the coins is to get a few people together who have golden lure modules, find some Pokestops that are close together, and drop all of your golden lure modules at the same time, so you can then spin multiple golden stops at a time. Outside of this, occasionally there are in-game events where spinning golden Pokestops will yield more coins than normal. Some events also make it so Pokestops can turn golden by themselves without a use of the golden lure module, but these events typically only happen once a year for around a week, so if you don't happen to be playing during that time, they aren't much help. Also, just to note that you can rarely get an encounter with Gimmighoul from a golden lured Pokestop, so if you can't get access to a Nintendo Switch to get Gimmighoul, then it is worth trying to go to any golden Pokestop that you see. Moving on to regional Pokemon. Now there are many regional Pokemon in Pokemon Go, but some are a lot rarer than others, and one of these that is particularly rare is Comfey. This Pokemon made its debut in Pokemon Go during the Welcome to Alola season in 2022 and quickly became one of the rarest Pokemon because it is only available in Hawaii. And compared to some other regionals that are available in much bigger areas or even continents, this has made Comfey a pretty tough one to acquire for most players. Comfey though is not the only super rare regional. There are some that are technically even rarer. The Lake Guardians are regional legendary Pokemon that can be caught from raids occasionally in Pokemon Go, and you can remote raid the ones that aren't in your region, but they can also be found in the wild in their respective regions, and it's these wild Lake Guardians that are the rarer version of the Pokemon. They have an extremely low chance of spawning, and it is thought that only around 16 of them spawn per hour in the entire world. This makes these wild regional legendaries some of the hardest Pokemon to get in the game, but they aren't the only wild legendary Pokemon that you can find. Although they are somewhat easier to obtain these days, the Galarian birds are still some of the rarest Pokemon to obtain in the game, with the fact that they hardly ever spawn from your daily incense, and also because most of the time you only get one ball to throw at them before they flee. This is because they have a 90% flee rate, and on top of that they only have a 0.3% chance of being caught. This means that they are amongst the most difficult Pokemon to catch in the game. However, with the implementation of the Master Ball, these birds have become a little more common amongst trainers, and you can also use Origin Dialga's Roar of Time adventure effect to increase the timer on the daily incense to give yourself more chance at encountering them. As well as the Lake Trio and the Galarian birds, there are some other rare wild legendary Pokemon that not a lot of people have. Firstly, the wild Cantonian birds Moltres, Zapdos and Articuno. Like the Lake Trio, these Pokemon do appear in legendary raids pretty frequently, but their wild versions are much rarer. They have only been available in the wild a couple of times when Elite Raids were first introduced in Pokemon Go. The first Elite Raids featured Hooper Unbound, and on completion of these in-person raids, there was a chance for rare Pokemon to spawn around the host gym, and this included wild Moltres, Zapdos or Articuno. Not only are Elite Raids in-person only, making them pretty inaccessible, but also if you were lucky enough to complete a raid and get a rare encounter with a wild legendary bird, you still had to catch it, which wasn't easy because the flee rate was very high, and just to make it even more difficult, they were also bugged. This bug caused the wild legendary birds to sometimes appear outside of the 30-meter gym spawn radius, and so when you tapped on them, they would instantly disappear without even entering the encounter screen. And after this bug, Elite Raids going forward didn't have the wild legendaries as possible spawns, and some Elite Raids didn't have wild spawns at all. We have also seen wild legendary Entei, Raikou and Suicune during Johto Tour, wild Latios and Latias for the Hoenn Tour, and wild Uxie, Mesprit and Azal for the Sinnoh Tour. All of these were rare and had a high flee rate, but if you were lucky enough to encounter a shiny one, they wouldn't run, but their low catch rate still made them pretty difficult to obtain. Next we have the Dawnwings and Duskmane Necrozma, which have only recently been introduced into Pokemon Go with the GoFest 2024 events, and they are set to become some of the rarest Pokemon in the game. But why is this? Well, to get these fused versions of Necrozma, you need a few things. Firstly, you need a Necrozma, then you need a Solgaleo or Lunala, you also need 1000 Solar or Lunar Fusion Energy, and you need 30 Cosmog Candy per fusion. Necrozma will likely rotate into raids, hopefully on a yearly basis at least, but the only way to obtain Cosmog and its evolutions Solgaleo or Lunala is through specific special research that only comes around during specific events. And more often than not, this research is behind a paywall. Not only that, but it requires 125 Cosmog Candy to evolve Cosmog up to Solgaleo or Lunala, and while some of this candy is often available through the special research, you do need an extra 30 Cosmog Candy per fusion. Luckily, Necrozma raids do drop some of this Cosmog Candy, but it'll still require a good amount of raiding to get enough candy. And after getting all of this, you still need Lunar and Solar Fusion Energy. This may come in the form of special research, but you will most likely have to raid Duskmane and Dawnwings Necrozma to get the energy, and with the amount of energy you get per raid, to get the 1000 energy you need, you would need to do around 10 raids of each to do each fusion. Let's just hope they don't end up in Elite Raids like Mega Rayquaza did. The next Pokemon has only been previously available once, and that is Poipole and its evolution Naganadel. They have only recently been added to the game through seasonal exclusive research during the World of Wonders season, and if you didn't play the game during this time, you can't get Poipole or its evolution, and it's hard to say when they will be available available in the game again, or even how they'll be available. It's also worth noting that to evolve Poipole you do need 200 candy, which you could get from this specific special research along with the Poipole encounter, but that's not all you need to do to evolve it. You also need to catch 20 dragon type Pokemon whilst Poipole is your buddy. And that may sound easy, but outside of specific events, dragon types are actually the rarest type to encounter in the game, so if you do have a Poipole, I recommend making it your buddy at the start of a dragon themed event like a community day, raid day, etc. And whilst Lugia and Ho-Oh aren't particularly rare in Pokemon Go, there are some versions of them that are really rare to the point that very few people have them at the time of making this video. Of course, I am talking about their Apex forms. These Pokemon first became available as part of the Johto Tour event in February 2022, and to get them you had to purchase the $12 ticket for the event, which would get you a Masterwork research, which is basically a more time-consuming special research. And this research would reward you with an encounter with both Apex Ho-Oh and Lugia. But what exactly are Apex Pokemon? Well, they are effectively shadow Pokemon but with stronger versions of certain moves. For example, Apex Ho-Oh would have a stronger version of its legacy move Sacred Fire, known as Sacred Fire Plus, and if you did purify it then it would get access to Sacred Fire Plus Plus, which was an even stronger move. And it's worth noting that even with the stronger move, the non-purified version still does more damage. This was of course the same for Lugia, but with Aeroblast Plus and Aeroblast Plus Plus. These Pokemon haven't been seen in the game since 2022, but in the trailer for the Shared Skies season, there was a teaser that showed what appeared to be an Apex Lugia, meaning we could well be getting another chance at getting an Apex Lugia this season for the first time in 2 years. Also in Pokemon Go we do have a lot of costume variants of Pokemon, but some are a lot rarer than others. And one of them being the very sought after fan favourite Armoured Mewtwo. This version of Mewtwo first released in Pokemon Go in 2019 in 5-star raid battles, and it later returned to the game for Pokemon Day the following year, but it has been absent from the game ever since. And not only is it rare, but Armoured Mewtwo is also the only costume Pokemon that has different stats than the regular non-costume version of the Pokemon. And accompanying Armoured Mewtwo once returned to Pokemon Go in 2020 were clone Pokemon. This was for the Pokemon Day and to celebrate the release of the remake of the Pokemon Mewtwo Strikes Back movie on Netflix. The clone Pokemon that were released were Pikachu, Charizard, Blastoise and Venusaur that look pretty much the same as they do in the film. They were available for around a week and they haven't returned since, so they are some of the rarest variants of Pokemon in the game. Another notable rare costume Pokemon is Aerodactyl wearing a satchel. This version of Aerodactyl was only available to ticket holding trainers who attended in-person GoFest events in 2023. It hasn't returned to the game since, but I could imagine it being released globally during a global GoFest at some point in the future, or perhaps even for a future Adventure Week where many fossil Pokemon are featured. Next we have Nightcap Snorlax, which is only available for those that purchase the $50 Pokemon Go Plus Plus. To get this variant of Snorlax you would have to connect your Pokemon Go Plus Plus to Pokemon Go, and then you would receive a special research rewarding the Pokemon. This research requires you to use the Pokemon Go Plus Plus to track your sleep for a certain period of days. And with the fact there is a $50 price tag and the fact you only get a few encounters, this makes this variant of Snorlax a pretty rare one. Moving on to the master of costume Pokemon, Pikachu. There has been many costume Pikachu added to Pokemon Go, but here are some of the rarer ones. Firstly, and possibly the rarest of them all, is the Fragment Hat Pikachu. This variant of Pikachu was released as part of an event for the collaboration between the Pokemon Company and Fragment. And this Pikachu was literally only available for 2 days in 2018, and it's unlikely that it will ever return to the game in the future because it was such a specific costume for such a specific collaboration. We do also have Straw Hat Pikachu that was only available once, and that was for a week in July 2019. We also have the Witch Hat Pikachu that was only available during Halloween 2017 and 2018 events, and even more rare is the Witch Hat Pikachu, which could only be hatched during these times as well. There have also been many rare variants released for GoFest over the years, including the Popstar and Rockstar Pikachus, Shaman Scarf Pikachu, Crown Pikachus, etc. These are all rare variants of Pikachu that might actually not return to the game in the future. But there is one costume Pikachu that is particularly challenging to get, but it is always available: Libre Pikachu. This variant of Pikachu is a reward for reaching the highest rank in Go Battle League, which is Legend rank, and it is by no means an easy feat getting to this rank for the average player. This means that only really the top Go Battle League players can get this Pikachu. It's also worth noting that PhD Pikachu is currently a very rare version of Pikachu that is only available from winning being 100 Pokestop showcases, and unless you're living pretty rurally, the amount of competition for these showcases really makes them very difficult to win. We have also had many Halloween and winter holiday Pokemon costumes, and whilst rare, most of these do have a chance of coming back each year, so they are not as exclusive as some of the costume Pokemon I've mentioned previously. And lastly, we have the special costume Lugia. And whilst not a costume Pokemon in the traditional sense, it has no costume or visual changes from a regular Lugia, but it is considered a costume Pokemon in the costume Pokédex. This Lugia is up there with the rarest Pokemon in the game. It was only given to attendees at the 2017 in-person Go Fest as compensation for internet outages during the event, so only a very small group of players ever received one, and it was around 7 years ago at this point, so the odds of seeing someone that has this variant of Lugia are very low. And with that said, if you do want to know what are the best Pokemon to power up in Pokemon Go for raid attacking and for Go Battle League, then I recommend checking out this video next.